I am so excited that we are into season 3 of my podcast, Stories of Unconscious Bias. When I first began this podcast, I had no idea that it would take off. I began it because I genuinely want more people to listen, reflect, and learn about how our life experiences can influence us in ways that we cannot begin to imagine. Due to the wonderful candid stories my speakers have shared, I now know that my podcast is ranked in the top 5% globally. I want to thank all my speakers for this huge achievement. As always, if you enjoy it, please do share, rate, and review. Thank you for listening. Hello, I'd like to introduce Naira Manzoor. Naira Manzoor is from Kashmir, currently living and working in Delhi. Naira says she is 24, feels like 65, and has the soul of a teenager. She loves books, deep talks, travel, singing, thinking, and exploring life. Her life is focused around learning, and she believes in being herself and refuses to change for anyone. Life is a journey, a taxing one, she says, and I am up for it. I am looking forward to hearing Naira's thoughts on all of this. Thank you so much, Naira, for joining me to share your stories of unconscious bias.
Thank you so much for having me, Smita ma'am. It feels great to be a part of this conversation with you.
So, Naira, unconscious bias, what do you understand by those words, unconscious bias?
So, talking about unconscious bias, so as the name itself says, it's a kind of prejudice that a person develops unintentionally, or you can say without his own conscious awareness. And I think unconscious bias, like every person, every human being has a certain kind of unconscious bias, which is highly based on his upbringing or his life experiences.
That's interesting, but you use the word prejudice. And so you see unconscious bias perhaps more as a negative. Is that what you mean when you say a prejudice?
Based on my life experiences, I can say yes. I know unconscious bias can be both a positive and a negative one, but yes, when I say prejudice, yeah, negative one.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Naira. And you said based on your experiences, I wonder, do you think you could share some stories about that?
Yes. As you know, I come from a place which is often termed by people as land of uncertainties. So a place where we're left with no internet, no communication, like the communication is snapped and the moment is restricted most of the time. So we do not have any cinema halls, we do not have any clubs, no theaters, nothing of that sort. So we had some theaters like earlier before the political unrest started. But if you go to Kashmir now, you'll see that Palladium is in shambles. Naz is crumbling. Shiraz is a security bunker, and so is Feroz. Regal is becoming a mall, or maybe it has already become one. You never know. And Broadway is an office, and Khayyam is a hospital. So these were all cinema halls earlier.
And were
And
these cinema halls during your childhood, Naira, or
no,
has there?
so
This has always been closed from. I mean, you're 24 years old, so has it been like this for 24 years or longer?
no, so uh, I have first time watched a movie in Delhi at the age of 24. So when people hear that, it strikes them with surprise. So there's an unconscious bias that people have, against me based on, the place I come from. Whenever I say that, whenever utter the word Kashmir, or whenever I say that I'm from Kashmir, people do not realize, the extent or the reason of our sufferings. They do not understand why, where we're going through all this. So they think that I come from a land of extremists, and I've seen that the way they talk, or the way they behave with me they do not consider me as one of them. They think that I am from a god forsaken part of the country. And trust me when I'm saying I have paid a huge price for it, a huge price for it every time.
I'm sorry to hear that, and that's actually very moving, Naira. That you know, for listeners around the world who will be listening to this, imagine having never seen, never been into a cinema theater until the age of 24, and yet when you do go into a cinema theater for the first time in your life, in another part of the same country that you belong to, you are seen as somebody different. Um, can you
I would,
expand a little bit more?
yeah, I would like to share a story about it, which has shaped my life a lot. So, after I completed my graduation, I decided to pursue a course in company secretaryship, and I was selected in a very reputed institute in Delhi for company secretaries. So, that time I came to Delhi with my father for the first time. So, I had never been to Delhi before that. So I attended a class. I found it very good. And this next thing that I was supposed to do is find accommodation for myself. So at that time, I still remember Pulwama terror attack was a recent happening. So I was searching for PGs, for accommodation. And wherever I went, I remember I was asked one question: where are you from? Which is normal. The very moment I would say, just in order to keep it neutral, I would say Jammu and Kashmir. But people would, they wanted to reconfirm whether I'm from Kashmir or from Jammu. And the very moment I would say I'm from Kashmir, they denied me accommodation. And due to that thing, I was not able to pursue my course and I had to come back with my father. So that thing has hit me so bad. And I have still not been able to seek the answer of the question that what was my mistake, that I'm from Kashmir. I'm also one amongst you. I'm no one different. But why am I being treated differently, and why am I being discriminated?
Yes, and I'm very moved to hear that story, Naira, because from an unconscious bias perspective, if you were to use that story, I mean, things happen in various different situations, and there was a terrorist attack in a part of Kashmir, and at that time, what happened was the people of India were looking at an entire area and making an assumption of all the people rather than
Mhm.
seeing each of us as individuals. And that's what
Right,
so many people do. You know, we might
right.
go to a country, we might travel abroad for the first time in our lives, and we might have a
Mm,
bad experience. Somebody might come to Delhi for the first time from abroad,
right,
and they might have a
right.
bad experience, and they might say all of India is bad as a result. They might
That's
say we
correct.
never want to come back. And so
Mm,
because of one experience, all the people are affected. And that is a classic example of how
right.
people can be put into a box and the keys thrown away based on an experience that actually doesn't impact all the individuals. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Naira. Can you
Thank
share
you
some
so
more
much.
stories of your experiences in Kashmir?
Yeah. So one more thing I'd like to share, and I hope everybody will be able to relate, especially girls. So first of all, I like to start this story of mine with a disclaimer that I belong from a middle class Kashmiri urban household. So my parents have been very liberal and they have valued me for having an opinion of my own. So but when I see our society in general, what I am able to make out is that from times immemorial, marriage, it continues to exist as an institution, based on certain presumptions or biases, you can say. So, bias number one is roles. So whenever I discuss with my elders, or the people around me, I feel that we have been conditioned in a way that we believe that after marriage, a man is supposed to be the provider and the protector of the house, whereas we, the girls, are supposed to maintain that house. Or the bias number two is age. So a man, he becomes eligible for marriage when he starts earning, or as they say, apne paon pe khade ho ja, like you should stand up on your own feet. And a girl, once she crosses 20s, she becomes marriageable. And we come from a society where good girls, they do not say no to the family, to the elders, or to the society. So, if a girl boldly says that she does not want to marry, so I am the girl. If she says that I do not want to get married, or I do not find that this is the right age for me to get married, if the girl is bold enough to say so, I don't know why, but it becomes, harder for people to stomach this. They think she's being rude, she's being wayward, or she's being disobedient. So the whole theory of marriage, I don't know why. When a girl gets her first, she gets a marriage proposal from a well-to-do family, she's expected to say yes to that, and that makes me believe, I don't know whether I have an unconscious bias about marriage. You are the expert, so you will be the best people to say. I think the whole theory of marriage revolves around marrying the fattest turkey in the town. So marrying someone who is rich or well to do.
That's interesting. I think certainly in terms of unconscious biases, these are about cultural expectations. That's what I'm understanding from what you're saying. Because India is a very big place, and you were talking about your experiences of growing up in Kashmir, and probably, and what you're saying also, I'm sure, relates to a vast number of people in India. I mean, you're not alone in the commentary that you have made. And there was also very recently a Netflix documentary that talked about arranged marriages and uh, uh, um, people trying to find the right spouse,
Hmm.
for the bride or the groom. So
Right.
your point is in terms of unconscious bias. Your family. Just let me kind of recap what you're saying, Naira. Your family were liberal and exceptional because
Hmm.
amongst your friendship group, the expectation was that a woman would get married at 20 and a man as soon as he got a job and was earning and was able to stand on his own 2 feet. Whereas with you express the desire to challenge that stereotype, and you have been able to challenge that stereotype. And that says something about what you said much earlier on about unconscious biases. How do we get unconscious biases? We get them because, for many reasons, but certainly one of them is our upbringing and how we are brought up by our parents, our parenting, and the influences we might have from them. And so,
Hmm.
what you're saying to me is that your unconscious biases are far less purely because you've had the support of liberal, accepting parents who allow you to be yourself. That's my understanding of what you've said to me. Am I right?
I believe yes. But based on my struggles, or when I told you that my definition of unconscious bias will be more of a negative thing, because the way I have suffered or struggled, I should say. So when I'd like to share something. So when I came to Delhi for the second time and I wanted to work, I was very reluctant, and that was also based on an unconscious bias. I thought that maybe for the second time the same thing will happen to me. Maybe people will not be accepting, you know or whenever when I'll appear in an interview, maybe I'll be judged on the basis of the place I come from. So that was my unconscious bias. But I got selected, and right now I'm working. So what I can comprehend is that all the people are not alike. There are people who will judge you for the way you are. They will not consider where you come from or which part of the world you belong. They will judge you for your capabilities and your abilities. So that was my unconscious bias. when I thought that if when I'll come to Delhi for the second time, maybe I'll face the same thing because everybody will be thinking of me in the same manner. So that was an unconscious bias I had.
That's brilliant, and you're absolutely right on that. And it's something that you're not alone in doing, Naira. We all do it. We have one bad experience, and then we decide it's never, that whether it's an area. So people think of a place like Kashmir because of the terrorist attack, and they put everybody into the same group. Similarly, you arrived in India last year, not in India, in Delhi last year, and had a very bad experience, and as a result felt that you will have exactly the same experience again. But 1 year later, people's memories had begun to fade a little bit, and therefore they were far more accepting because they would have asked you the same questions, obviously. Where are you from? And you would have said Jammu and Kashmir, or you would have said Kashmir. And yet this time, 1 year later, people reacted differently to you. And that's very powerful because it makes us realize that with time, we are also able to be more accepting of what is happening around us and try and not have unconscious biases. So it wasn't just your own unconscious bias, which you then challenged and you were proving yourself wrong because people were accepting of you, but in the people themselves in Delhi who you met, who gave you accommodation. You're staying somewhere at the moment. You couldn't get any accommodation 1 year ago. They had begun to think differently too. So that instinctive unconscious bias they might have had has also begun to change. So that's great.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
Right.
could you share another story, perhaps?
So another story I think will be based on my appearance. So I believe, there are certain unconscious biases, like we have racial bias or community bias, religion bias. These kinds of biases are well documented and well talked about. However, we have this thing called appearance bias. Because this is our own personal story, because everybody is facing, being subjected to one or another kind of appearance bias. I think this, type of bias is not, well talked about or well documented. So earlier, I used to be embarrassed, but now I boldly say that I'm short and my height is just 4 feet 11 inches. So when I walk with my brother, who is 9 years younger to me, people think that he is the elder one and I am still, I'm younger to him. So I'm a kid based on my height. So, you know, uh, when I look back at life and I see how I have faced everything and how I continue to face the challenges, whatever life throws on me, I have an unconscious bias about myself. This is a positive one that maybe precious things come in small packages. So, when I was in class 11, so I have studied in a boarding school from my sixth class up to my 12th class. So when I was in 11th class, I not only had, performed well academically, but I had been awarded first by Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs for my meritorious performance in Indian National Youth Parliament competition. And apart from that, I used to participate in extracurricular activities. So I used to love participating. So, I had all the capabilities to be the school leader because I was the all rounder of the school. And if you'll still go to my school, you will see we have a board in our school, and there my name is written as the student of the year of my school. So I was when I was in my 11th class, and we had the rule of choosing house captains and school captains for the year. One of my teacher told me that, although you have achieved a lot, you have participated a lot, but I will not be able to select you. Why? Because you're short, and you're short, which means you're physically weak, and you're less commanding, and people will not be able to, they will not listen to you, and that makes you less dominating, and that does not make you a good leader. And I have faced interviews where I have been judged on the basis of my height. So I'm short. People presume that I'm physically weak, and they think I'll not be able to handle work pressure, or I'll not be able to deal with the day-to-day stress that we have in our work environment. So this is an unconscious bias that people have about regarding me based on my appearance.
It's interesting that your teachers assumed that you cannot be a good leader purely based on the top, based on your height. Whereas you and I both know there are many, many famous leaders who are considered to be short. I mean, Napoleon Bonaparte comes to mind. And
Right.
I, I mean, and depending on the generation and depending on the gender, these people were considered short. Many people who are world leaders or were world leaders at some level who were not considered to be tall, and yet there was made an assumption that at school you cannot be a leader. That shows that person, your teacher's unconscious bias, which is unfortunate for her or him. I don't know who it was. Who hopefully, if they listen to this interview, might recognize that if they Google, they will find many unshort leaders and very highly successful leaders. So, um, but how did you manage to challenge yourself and believe in yourself despite the fact that this is what was being said to you, Naira?
So I have started accepting myself the way I am. So I know if I try to please others, is when you will try to, I can say, inflict pressure on yourself or harm yourself. So you have to start accepting yourself. So God has created us beautifully, and God never makes mistakes. So we have to realize that. So I started, I refused to accept somebody else's definition of me, and I started accepting myself the way I am. I started focusing on the good things that I can do, or my capabilities, instead of focusing on negativities, because the more negativity that I'll think about, the more negative I'll become, and I lose my self esteem, my self confidence, and that is something I will never want to do. So I learned that you should always love yourself for the way you are. And if you do that, you will, step forward in life with grace.
That's so moving and so beautifully said, Naira. But it's so difficult to do. I'm sure there are many listeners saying, I know what it feels like. I know I've been there. I know when I don't see myself as beautiful or pretty or fat or thin or dark or short or whatever it might be. But I don't know how to do that. So what kind of advice can you give us? I mean, what do you say to yourself every day? Because it's easier said than done, surely.
So, as I told you, I do remember when I connected with you, I told you that I have a story. And I think even if it changes a life of a single individual, our work is half done. So I'll share a story. It's personal, but I will. So after I completed my graduation, I was not able to pursue my higher studies. So at that time, I was, I should say, depressed. So when I say depressed, I would wake up every day, every night, and I would cry for myself because I was very, career oriented, and I had dreams of achieving higher things, and I had performed very well in my school and I in my college, and I believed that I would excel. So in my academics, so somehow I was not able to pursue my studies further. At that time I realized that when you're not doing something, nobody is going to ask you, nobody is going to even care. As long as you're doing something and you're achieving something, people will say that, yeah, I know her, she's my relative, or she's my family member, I know her. Okay. But if you're not doing something, if you're sitting idle, people will at times refuse to recognize you. So this may sound harsh, but this is the reality that I've experienced firsthand. So you get respect when you are someone, when you're doing something. When you're no one, people forget you. They forget what you have done for them, they forget who you are, or they even forget what you have done in your past. So at that time, I learned that if I will not accept myself for who I am, if I'll not respect myself for who I am, No one is going to do that because the world is very cruel. So you have to stand for yourself and you have to accept yourself for who you are. Is only when the people around you and when the world will stand for you and accept you.
Oh, that's moving and that's powerful, and it's, it's a life learning for all of us, and it's fantastic that you've been able to be self-aware and self-reflective enough to recognize how you must challenge your own unconscious biases and believe in yourself. So I really appreciate your honesty and your stories. Naira Manzoor, thank you so very much for sharing your stories of unconscious bias.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so great to discuss things with you and to express myself with you. It feels really great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to my podcast, Stories of Unconscious Bias. If you enjoyed hearing this episode, do tune in every Saturday for a new interview. And if you could share, leave a review and rating, that would be hugely appreciated. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter @Smita Tharoor, and feel free to suggest new guests. Until next week.